Hi guys, so today I'm coming to you with a ship breakdown for Armada, and I'm talking about the Nebulon B today. Now the Nebulon B is one of the most iconic ships for the Rebellion in Star Wars. You've seen it in The Empire Strikes Back and The Return of the Jedi. You've also probably seen it as one of the first ships you've ever saw because it came in Wave 1 as well as in the core set. So it was probably one of the first ships you've ever had in your hands. Now the Nebulon B is kind of a cheaper ship. It comes in two variants. Now we're going to talk about those variants. We're going to talk about some of its strengths and its weaknesses, some of the roles it can fill in the game today. We're also going to talk about the titles that are available for it, and we're going to talk about some of the best commanders to use if you're fielding a Nebulon B kind of as your centerpiece, or if you're basing your build around a Nebulon B. So let's talk about the Nebulon B. It's got three red dice in the front. It's got 3 shields in the front. From the front arc of this thing, it is basically as strong as a Victory class Star Destroyer, so at long range. So it's very, very strong in the front, very, very weak on the sides. It's only got 1 shield on the sides, so that definitely makes it a very weaker ship. It comes in 2 variants. It comes in the Nebulon B support refit, and it also comes at only 51 points. It also comes in the Escort Frigate at 57 points. Now, the Escort Frigate gives you a few advantages. It gives you an extra blue dice for your anti-squadron, and it also gives you an extra squadron for your squadron commands. So it's a little bit better in the role of a carrier, or better in the role of anti-squadron. But other than that, the 2 ships are identical. Now, this ship also has 2 braces. It's very nice to have a ship with a second brace because you're less vulnerable to that single accuracy kind of shutting down your brace. So that is nice, but it suffers also from the lack of a redirect. So if you get shot on the side with enough dice, you are not going to be able to send them to your front and your strong shield zone. You're going to have to just take them all on the side. Maybe you get lucky and can cancel something with the 1 evade you have, but hopefully it's not enough that you can, so hopefully you can brace and not die. But it has definitely happened on more than one occasion where a full strength Nebulon gets a strong shot to the side and just gets popped. So that's really the biggest weakness of the Nebulon B, is that very, very weak and vulnerable side arc with very few offensive dice coming out of it and very few shields to really protect it on the side. So maneuverability is very important for a ship like this because you really want to point it right at the enemy fleet. And so that's one of the things that's going to factor into some of our build choices and some of the choices that I'm going to present to you later on in this video. But now I'd like to talk about some of the titles that come into this ship. So the first title I want to talk about is the Redemption. And the Redemption costs 8 points and is the most expensive of all the titles. And I also, at least from my experience, is probably by far the least used title for the Nebulon B. Now, Redemption is pretty much a support title. It allows your other ships that are closer, that are close to it, to be able to get an extra engineering point when they do an engineering command. Now, I don't see that many people doing engineering commands until much later in the game, so for at least the first 3 turns, you're probably not getting any value at all out of the Redemption title. That's one of the reasons why I don't think it gets seen as much, because you have to wait before you can really get value out of it. But it's also important to know that you can also get value out of this with using an engineer token. You don't necessarily have to have your other ships doing an engineer command on the command dial. If they have the tokens, they can still get that extra point, and that can make a critical token that might have only given you 2 engineering points. It could potentially make that token give you a 3rd engineering point to get rid of that critical that was going to stop it from attacking at long range, or something great. So it definitely has options, but there's a lot of ways to really get tokens now. For example, Garm Bel Iblis or the Rebel Transports with CommsNet giving you tokens that way. So there are a lot of different ways to get tokens. So it's can be used that way, or it can just make your regular command more powerful. So that's great. You can also kind of take advantage of it being a support ship and add some other things on there, like projection experts, or maybe even Leia. So you can potentially put Leia on there too, and just make it a full-blown support ship. And in that aspect, it would be a support ship that happens to also have some teeth, because it's still got that frontal arc. It's still got three red dice, which is not bad for a support ship. So you can run it, in a lot of different ways. If any of my viewers, if you've run the Redemption and had some success with it, I'd love to hear, some of your build ideas for the Redemption, because I really have no interest in running it currently. But I'm a very offensive player. I don't like to play tanky, and I don't like to count on getting hit that much. I want to just throw as many dice at you as I can. So if I'm running a Nebulon B or 2, I'm probably going to run the other 2 titles that are more offensive oriented. So, which brings me to the next title, Salvation. Now, Salvation is the teeth of the Nebulon. It is 7 points, and it allows all of your crits out of your front arc to deal 2 damage instead of just the 1 damage. And the thing is, they're still crits, so they will still also trigger the crit effect. So that's fantastic, right? A single crit is now 2 damage, including its own crit. So that's really cool. One of the things you probably want to do if you're running a Salvation is to give yourself more red dice, right? You want to have more dice out of the front. So potentially Spinal Armament, which is great. Or you could also consider something like Turbo Laser Reroute Circuits. You do have the evade there. You could spend that to force a crit if you needed to. It's also a form of dice mitigation, so it would allow you to handle having a blank die. So that's very good for it. And it also allows you to do something with that evade once you get into close range. As a matter of fact, I'd also like to say that with Salvation, it's possible if you've got one of these upgrades called Slaved Turrets, one of the worst upgrades in the game. This is one of the few ships that you could actually consider putting that on. I think it's a little overcosted because I think slave turrets should probably only cost 4 or 5. But here's a ship that you only get its benefit when you're attacking out of the front arc. You can't put gunnery teams on it, so you're probably only going to attack once anyway. Or one meaningful attack anyway. So you may, if you only have 6 points left over, you might want to consider putting slaved turrets on the Salvation. Although generally that's kind of like a last resort thing. I would probably rather have Spinal Armament or Turbo Laser Reroute Circuits. But you could even consider something like XI7s as well. There's a lot of options here, but I think I really like Turbo Laser Reroutes or Spinal Armament best for the Salvation. Now, if there's other options too. Ramus Antilles is a great crew to put on the Salvation, so you can do your concentrate fire command and also get a reroll, so you can get some dice mitigation that way. You may want to consider an intel officer. You don't have a great chance of getting an accuracy on red dice, so if they do have a single brace that you're attacking, it's a good way for you to say, all right, fine, you can brace if you want, but you're going to lose it. So it kind of makes up for the lack of an accuracy. Or consider something like Lando Calrissian. Lando is great to protect your side arc from that one lucky attack that has, 13 damage, or maybe only 7 damage and 2 accuracies, and they both target both of your braces. So Lando is a great way to kind of help you stay alive, especially if this is an important ship in your build. If this is one of your biggest damage dealers, it can easily be worth the investment of the 4 points for Lando. So now I want to talk about the Yavaris. The Yavaris is a fantastic title that's only gotten better in time. Yavaris only costs 5 points too, and I think it's worth so much more than that. But what it allows you to do is to take squadrons that it's activated, and if they haven't moved during this activation, it allows them to attack again. So that's fantastic, right? Because that could be an attack against a squadron. It can be an attack against a ship. It can allow you B-Wings to attack, potentially do 3 damage to a ship, and then attack again. And and if you're running the Yavaris, you probably want to go spend the extra money and put it on the Nebulon B escort frigate, the 57-point version, so you get the 2 squadrons that you can activate, and then hopefully you've got some way to get extra tokens on there, whether it be from a Rebel Transport, Garm Bel Iblis, or maybe you're running Ramus Antilles on this and you are getting your squadrons that way. So now you can have 3 squadrons, maybe 3 B-Wings even, or 3 Skurg bombers, or Luke Skywalker and 2 B-Wings, or something like, or there's a ton of options, there's a ton of ways you can do it. But those are some of my favorites to really take advantage of this double attack, because you get so much out of those ships. But being able to attack twice is just huge. Now the problem is you can't move if you're doing that, so there's some new upgrades that really allow you to mitigate that restriction, and that's what makes the Yavaris so much better right now. For example, Fighter Coordination Team and Flight Commander. So these two lovely gentlemen are just fantastic. So the Fighter Coordination Team will allow you to move, and then after you move, to push 2 ships forward. All right. Well, 2 ships if you're running the Nebulon B. The Nebulon B escort frigate. And then the Flight Commander allows you to do your squadron command after you've moved. Now, both of these things kind of trigger at the same time, so you have the option of which one you want to resolve first. So the combo is basically you resolve Fighter Coordination Team first, push those B-Wings just a little bit closer to the enemy Star Destroyer, or whoever you're fighting, and then resolve your resolve your squadron command with Flight Commander, allowing your B-wings to attack twice each. Because because now the movement for fighter coordination team is not considered to be during this activation because you didn't resolve your your squadron command until after resolving fighter coordination team. So it's a really great combination. The problem is if you use those guys, then you're kind of, you don't have room for something like Ramus Antilles. So although I really, personally, my favorite way to run it is with the Flight Commander and the Fighter Coordination Team. But there are other ways to run it as well. I think that's my favorite way to run it right now. So if you've got a better way, I'd love to hear about it. But that's kind of the way I like to do it. And you really don't even need to put a turbo laser upgrade on the Yavaris, but you totally can, because don't forget it can shoot too. Because so much of the power of the Yavaris is in its squadrons and in their double attack that you sometimes forget. Oh yeah, I also get to attack as well, and it's got a pretty formidable anti-squadron attack also. So if your ships are close, if your squadrons are close to you, and the enemy comes in to try to tie you up, you can hopefully try to free them by doing some anti-squadron attacks before you go ahead and move and then free, get everybody doing their double taps. Love the Yavaris. I think it's one of the best carriers out there. And what's great about it is it took a ship. Without this title, I wouldn't have thought that the Escort would really be a good carrier, because it's only got the carrier value of 2, squadron value of 2. And it also is lacking the offensive retrofit. So you don't even have, a way to increase your squadron value, or you don't have, to be able to activate squadrons at long range. So that, kind of is a limiting factor for this thing. But what's really great about it is the Yavaris is just so strong, it totally compensates for that weakness, and I love it. Now, there are different roles that the ship can perform. Now, I've kind of already talked about some of them through their titles, right? So obviously, this role can be an attacker. It's kind of like an artillery piece, attacking from long range. You kind of want to keep it closer to the back. You don't want to send it blazing in forward ahead of all your other ships, generally. But because it works best at long range, because it's only got red dice. You get closer, it doesn't gain anything from that. In fact, it only makes you more vulnerable, because you also have the evade, which protects you from long range attacks. So you kind of want to have a slow approach and have this thing chucking as many dice as possible. So that's one role for it. And the challenge in that role too is you have to really point your ships right at the enemy. Because they have such a narrow front arc, it's very easy for an enemy to overshoot you. You don't have a Star Destroyer sized arc here. It's very narrow, so you really have to think about your maneuverability. And staying farther back helps, gives you a wider berth as far as, gives you a little bit more error correction. So that's another reason why you want to stay farther back. The ship can also perform the carrier role. Absolutely it can. Generally, though, you probably only want one carrier for the Yavaris, but it is possible in some cases, especially if you're going with a lot of Nebulons, to consider running a couple of escort frigates and having them all do a little bit of carrying if you have a little bit of squadron commands. Because the 2 is still okay. 2 is decent. Usually you want more, but 2 is decent, and you can get your firepower. It's kind of like a hybrid if you run it that way, but they can work as carriers. Generally, only the Yavaris is going to be your Nebulon that's performing the duties of a carrier, though. Generally, it's certainly possible. You can put Salvation on an escort frigate version and have it do a little bit of both, but generally it's going to be your Yavaris. This can also be a swarm ship. You can fit a lot of these into a list, and they're cheap enough to do it. And you can have a potentially very, very powerful first round of shooting, because you'll have so many dice coming as soon as everybody's in range, at long range. Provided you can position them all well enough, you can potentially swarm up pretty good with this. Now, I've never actually seen somebody swarm, and I haven't done it yet either. I'm kind of tempted, because I recently bought my 4th Nebulon, and I haven't run all 4 together at once before, but I'm very tempted to. But if you've done it, I'd love to hear about it. But certainly the numbers are there, and I've put builds together that could do it. I just haven't flown it yet, and because the slow approach, and there is a certain skill level to making sure that you have all of your ships pointed at the same target, it could be challenging to fly it as a swarm. But it is an option. It's not one that I would recommend to a new player, but I'm trying to talk about more types of builds than I currently fly. Because there's a lot of options in this ship. It's very versatile. And it can be a support ship as well. I don't think it's very strong for a support ship, but it does have roles that it can fill in there. For example, with the Redemption title or stuff like Projection Experts, it can perform that option. It's just, I think there are other ships that perform the support role a little better. Especially, there's an entire line of ships, the flotillas, the rebel transports, that kind of do that whole job better. So granted, you can team them up with that, so it can be a support ship if you want your support ship to also have teeth, and that would be kind of the role that it might, because it's still got the 3 attack dice at long range, so you still have that. Now I'm going to talk about the commanders that you might want to consider using if you're building your list or based kind of on a Nebulon B standpoint. I'm going to rank them from worst to best, at least in my opinion, and this is not to say that these commanders are necessarily bad or good in general. This is more or less how they apply to the Nebulon B itself. So at the bottom of the list is Ackbar. Now again, let me reiterate, this is my opinion, and it's only my opinion, and it's only specifically on how these guys apply to the Nebulon. So Ackbar is a great commander, just not for the Nebulon. Okay, so his entire strength is based on broadside combat, whereas the Nebulon is based on pointing your front directly at the enemy. So their two are completely counterproductive to mix with each other. I'm not saying you can't have a Nebulon B in a list that has Ackbar in it. But if the Nebulon B is your center point, you're really not enhancing the Nebulon B by throwing Ackbar as your commander, because you want to be attacking out of the front arc. You don't want to be stuck attacking out of your side arc. Granted, you still can, because Ackbar would potentially raise that 1 dice to 3 dice out the side, but on almost every other ship that's out there, he's giving these ships like 5 dice out the side, or even more in some cases. So he doesn't do a whole lot for the Nebulon B. As a matter of fact, if you wanted, side arc only, you'd probably be better off running, some Corellian corvettes. But the Nebulon B does have a wide side arc, so you can use it with Ackbar. I really don't recommend that. Next would be Aaron Kraken. So Aaron Kraken is going to work with the Nebulon B. I just don't think he works very well with it. The reason being, you need to be at speed 3 to utilize his ability, and while I would love to give the defensive option to the Nebulon B, I don't want my Nebulon Bs at speed 3. Again, like I said, this is my opinion. I'm sure somebody out there has made this work, but it's just because you need to have them pointed right at the enemy that the Nebulon B's front arc is so narrow. If you're stuck at speed 3, you're not going to be able to do that slow approach like I was talking about before. You're not going to be able to let it take that artillery kind of long range hang back, keep the enemy in your arc. You're going to end up overshooting them, and you're probably going to end up exposing your side. And even though they'll lose 1 die for it being obstructed, they're going to have your side arc. And so I think the weakness that you gain from going too fast outweighs the benefit that you get from Aaron Kraken, specifically for the Nebulon Bs. Other ships he may work a lot better with, but with the Nebulon Bs, I just don't really see maintaining a speed 3 posture with them. Next is Garm Bel Iblis. Now, Garm Bel Iblis usually would rank a little bit lower for a lot of ships, but because there's a couple of scenarios we've already talked about in this video that can really be enhanced by there being tokens out there, that's why I have Garm a little bit higher. So Garm, will only be able to give these guys 2 tokens each, but 2 tokens is still better than nothing, or better than 1. And he can also give your whole fleet tokens. So if you're running Redemption and you want everybody to be able to get a little bit more out of those engineering tokens, he makes all those count for 1 point more. Or if you're running carriers, like maybe you're running Yavaris, it's a way for you to get an extra squadron command token on the Yavaris, so you can activate your 3 squadrons. So there are some uses for Garm, and it works. It can work here. Although I think Garm is going to get a little better as time goes by. We're starting to see some new stuff come into the game that takes more advantage of tokens, and I think that's great because Garm has kind of been underrated for a long time, and I'd love to see him kind of become more prominent. But for right now, he's still a little low on the list, but he has his uses. Next up is Riken. So Riken is kind of a situational place on here. He can be very, very strong, but he needs a certain type of list, I think, to make him shine. So I think in this case, you would probably need to be running some kind of swarm or swarm hybrid with your Nebulons if you wanted to really get the most out of Riken, because, like I said, if you're running a whole lot, it takes some skill to have them all pointed at the same enemy, or maybe you're running Nebulons and other ships like CR-90s or something like that. But it really stinks to have like maybe 6 or 7 activations, and then your opponent gets, you know, a great Star Destroyer shot and takes out 2 of your ships because he had 2 that he could hit with a side arc, or he could hit in your side arc, and you know, you lost 2 ships before you could even shoot them on like turn 4. And so Riken really prevents against a situation like that. So Riken's fantastic for ensuring that all of your ships are gonna be able to shoot. So if you're running Nebulons and you have a high activation list, like maybe 6 or 7, you know, then I can definitely see a lot of value in bringing Riken as your commander in that case. Next up is Mon Mothma. Now, Mon Mothma is just great all around for the Rebels. Anybody who's got an evade token, she gives you a lot more survivability. I think, because you've only got 1 here, so she's not at the top of the list, but she's still, you know, she's higher up. I think the only reason that I put Kraken so low and her so high is they both give some extra survivability to a ship that has a really weak side arc, but hers doesn't have any drawback, right? You can stay at speed 1 and still get Mon Mothma's ability. And I guess there is some drawback if you're running turbo laser reroute circuits on your Nebulon Bs. You may not want to, you're kind of double dipping for that same, that you're really competing for that 1 defense token. But a lot of times, that's not going to be the case. So I think in general, Mon Mothma is very good for Nebulon Bs. It makes that brace that much stronger. If you can wipe out, if you can knock out, a double hit die, that red die that's got 2 hits on it. Now all of a sudden, that could be the difference between life and death. So that's pretty nice. Maydeen is next. Maydeen is great for most Rebel lists, and because he gives you so much more maneuverability. And now the Nebulon B is kind of a decent maneuverability ship. It's got, it's got respectable maneuverability, but Maydeen gives it it brings it up a whole tier as far as maneuverability goes. And this is a ship I think that really needs it, because I've said a couple of times already, you really want to be pointed right at your enemy. And you also want to restrict their access to your sides. And so having somebody like Maydeen, can really help ensure that you get your shots and that you protect your own sides. So I think Maydeen is great for Nebulon Bs, and that's why he ranks number 3 on my list. All right, now we're into the top 2. Next up is Sato. Now, Sato is a newcomer to the game. He's fantastic, and I kind of didn't appreciate how good he was going to be until somebody used him against me, and I was like, wow, he's got potential. So what's great about Sato is that he can allow you to roll black dice at long range, effectively. That's what it really boils down to. Well, you have the choice, maybe you really need accuracy, you can potentially roll blue dice, but most of the time, what you're probably going to be doing here with Sato is, taking those 3 red dice at long range and making 2 of them black dice and then rolling your dice. And, you have a pretty good chance of getting a hit crit. And if you're running the Salvation title, a hit crit on a black die is 3 damage. So, that's even better. But this works even without the Salvation title, because it still makes those regular Nebulons, even if you're running like a swarm or something, it makes all of them very much more deadly. So, Sato is awesome. The only reason he's not my number 1 right now is because he has this dependency on having squadrons, a sufficient amount of squadrons, not just in your builds, but also control over those squadrons. So you need you need certain pieces. You need for them not to be able to be tied up. So you would need intel, you would need carriers, you need probably potentially to go first. Your ships might even all need squadron tokens so they can force a ship there. There's a lot of little things that can hamper Sato's ability, but he's not impossible to make work. He's not even that hard to make work. You just have to make sure you have a couple of key things. So he's not a universe. He doesn't work in all builds, which leads into my number 1, Dodonna. Dodonna works in all builds. Dodonna is the best there is. Dodonna for life. If I am still playing this game in another 5 years and I'm still using Dodonna, I'm probably going to get a Dodonna tattoo, because I love Dodonna. He's the cheapest in the game. He's the cheapest commander, or tied for cheapest. And his ability is possibly the best. I would probably use Dodonna if he cost 35 points. I would probably still use it. I might even use him if he cost 40 points. because he's that good. Like, all right, Dodonna is great with the Salvation because you were trying to get crits anyway, right? So, I mean, he's good with the Salvation. He's great with the Yavaris because you get your B-Wings, your Bombers in there doing double taps. And now you're getting, or your Luke Skywalker potentially attacking twice, and you're forcing those Dodonna crits. He's just amazing. He's great with certain objectives, even. I mean, and we're getting away from this ship specifically, but he's a commander that if you get, like, pick minefields, for example, and your opponent flies over, an asteroid has deal face-up damage, you still get to pick that crit. So you don't even have to do anything for Dodonna to work. And he's so cheap, he allows you a lot to fit whatever you need. Like, a lot of times, just a cheap commander is something you just need. Like, I've got the perfect build, and I only have 20 points left. Oh, okay, well, I'll just pick, on the Imperial side, maybe you just pick Ozzel because, you just needed a cheap commander. But in this case, he just works perfectly with every single build, and this is no exception. As a matter of fact, this is running Yavaris, Dodonna's a must-have for me. If you're running different configurations, there's some other options that you may want to consider, but Dodonna works in every possible list, and it works really, really, really well for bombers. Works really, really well for the Salvation. Works even really well for certain objectives you may be running. He's just great all around, and he's cheap. So Dodonna's the clear winner here as far as what to use. But there are a lot of good options. And I hope you found this video helpful. I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to be doing more of these. So if you like this type of video, feel free to subscribe. And as always, I appreciate the thumbs up and the comments that you guys leave. I definitely appreciate it. You guys are awesome. And thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.